can beat the president.
Trust and stability and the commander-in-chief test, yes. But again, it brings a whole nother dynamic when you look at the differing views that Democratic voters here, caucus goers, have of what they want in a commander-in-chief. Do they want a Bernie Sanders anti-interventionist, or do they want somebody who has experience and who has, as I'm sure you are here behind us, voted for things like the Iraq War, and maybe has made other decisions that he doesn't regret, and has been a leader on national security, but also has some that he doesn't.
But as I said earlier, it can benefit both of them within their own bases. Well, Bernie Sanders could consolidate the progressive base if people see him as leading the way on this anti-interventionist campaign. Joe Biden, I think, has bona fide national security credentials. He has to explain the Iraq vote. But, I saw him in the administration when I was there, and, he has a great deal of experience. The world knows him. He knows the world. That's an advantage to him, and he's going to try and take advantage of it here.
And these are voters, and throughout the country as you head to the election, there's a key decision. Do you want a revolution right now? Or do you just want stability to get you through the next whatever it is? And that's the choice the voters in Iowa have, and I think it's the choice that the electorate has.
And the fact is that you have a multi-candidate field here, so it may be that there are enough people who want a revolution to allow Bernie Sanders to win, and there are enough people who want evolution to allow a Joe Biden to win because of the way the votes divide up.
And it all comes down for three of the senators on the stage to tonight. They are going to be off the trail largely on impeachment. Let's go. That's it for us right here. We'll be back after the debate. Right now, let's go over to Will Blitzer.
Live from Drake University in Iowa, this is the CNN Democratic presidential debate in partnership with the Des Moines Register. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer, along with CNN's Abby Phillip. I'm the Des Moines Register's chief politics reporter, Brianne Quanenstein.
Top 6 Democratic presidential candidates are in place. This is their final debate before the first votes of the 2020 presidential campaign. The Iowa caucuses are 20 days away.
Before we begin, a reminder of the ground rules. You'll each receive 75 seconds to answer questions, 45 seconds for responses and rebuttals, and 15 seconds for clarifications. Please refrain from interrupting your fellow candidates, as that will count against your time.
All right, so let's begin right now. Just this month, the United States and Iran were on the brink of war, which has reignited the debate over America's role in the world and which of you is best prepared to be commander-in-chief. So let's have the debate right now. Senator Sanders, why are you best prepared, the best prepared person on this stage to be commander-in-chief?
Yes, I think my record speaks to that, Wolf. In 2002, when the Congress was debating whether or not we go into a war in Iraq, invade Iraq, I got up on the floor of the House and I said that would be a disaster. It would lead to unprecedented levels of chaos in the region. And I not only voted against the war, I helped lead the effort against that war. Just last year, I helped, for the first time in the modern history of this country, pass a War Powers Act resolution, working with a conservative Republican, Mike Lee of Utah, which said that the war in Yemen, led by Saudi Arabia, was unconstitutional because Congress had not authorized it. We got a majority vote in the Senate. We got a majority vote in the House. Unfortunately, Bush vetoed that, and that horrific war continues. I am able to work with Republicans. I am able to bring people together to try to create a world where we solve conflicts over the negotiating table, not through military efforts.
Vice President Biden, you talk a lot about your experience, but some of your competitors have taken issue with that experience, questioning your judgment in voting to authorize the Iraq War. Why are you the best prepared person on this stage to be commander-in-chief?
I said 13 years ago it was a mistake to give the president the authority to go to war if, in fact, he couldn't get inspectors into Iraq to stop what thought to be the attempt to get a nuclear weapon. It was a mistake, and I acknowledge that. But right out, the man who also argued against that war, Barack Obama, picked me to be his vice president. And once we were elected president, and vice president, he turned to me and asked me to end that war. I know what it's like to send a son or daughter, like our colleague has gone to war in Afghanistan, my son for a year in Iraq. And that's why I do it very, very reluctantly. That's why I led the effort, as you know, Wolf, against surging tens of thousands of troops into Afghanistan. We should not send anyone anywhere unless the overwhelming vital interests of the United States are at stake. They were not at stake there. They were not at stake in Iraq. And it was a mistaken vote. But I think my record overall on everything we've done has been, I'm prepared to compare it to anybody's on this stage.
Senator Sanders, you have been attacking Vice President Biden's vote on the Iraq War, but you recently acknowledged that your vote to authorize the war in Afghanistan was also a mistake. So you both acknowledged mistakes. Why should the American people trust your judgment more?
Well, it's a little bit of a difference. On that particular vote, every single member of the House, including myself, voted for it. Only Barbara Lee voted against it. But what I understood from right away in terms of the war in Iraq, the difference here is that the war in Iraq turned out to be the worst foreign policy blunder in the modern history of this country. As Joe well knows, we lost 4,500 brave troops. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis died. We have spent trillions of dollars on that endless war, money which should go into healthcare and education and infrastructure in this country. Joe and I listened to what Dick Cheney and George Bush and Rumsfeld had to say. I thought they were lying. I didn't believe them for a moment. I took to the floor. I did everything I could to prevent that war. Joe saw it differently.
Vice President Biden.
I was asked to bring 156,000 troops home from that war, which I did. I led that effort. It was a mistake to trust that they weren't going to go to war. They said they were not going to go to war. They said they were just going to get inspectors in. The world, in fact, voted to send inspectors in, and they still went to war. From that point on, I was in the position of making the case that it was a big, big mistake. And from that point on, I moved to bring those troops home.
Senator Klobuchar, you publicly questioned Mayor Buttigieg's experience when it comes to being commander-in-chief. Why is your time as a U.S. Senator more valuable than his time as a U.S. Naval Intelligence Officer in Afghanistan and as mayor?
Thank you, Wolf. And I've been very clear that I respect the mayor's experience very much in the military. I just have different experience. I've been in the U.S. Senate for over 12 years. And I think what you want in a president is someone who has dealt with these life and death issues and who has made decisions. I will look at my position on the Iraq War first. I wasn't in the Senate for that vote, but I opposed that war from the very beginning. In my first campaign for Senate, I ran against a Republican who ran ads against me on it, but I stood my ground. When I got to the Senate, I pushed to bring our troops home. Then I have dealt with every issue from Afghanistan to keeping our troops with good health care after what we saw with Walter Reed and being part of an effort to improve the situation for our troops in a very big way with their education and with their jobs and also with their health care. I think right now what we should be talking about, though, Wolf, is what is happening right now with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is taking us pell-mell toward another war. We have a very important resolution. We just found out today that 4 Republicans are joining Democrats to go to him and say, you must have an authorization of military force if you're going to go to war with Iran. That is so important because we have a situation where he got us out of the Iranian nuclear agreement, something I worked on for a significant period of time. As president, I will get us back into that agreement. I will take an oath to protect and defend our Constitution,
Thank you.
and I will mean it.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. We're going to continue talking about who's best prepared to be Commander-in-Chief, Mayor Buttigieg.
Well, I bring a different perspective. There are enlisted people that I served with barely old enough to remember those votes on the authorization after 9/11, on the war in Iraq. And there are people now old enough to enlist who were not alive for some of those debates. The next president is going to be confronted with national security challenges different in scope and in kind from anything we've seen before. Not just conventional military challenges, not just stateless terrorism, but cybersecurity challenges, climate security challenges, foreign interference in our elections. It's going to take a view to the future as well as the readiness to learn from the lessons of the past. And for me, those lessons of the past are personal.
Senator Warren, in our new CNN Des Moines Register poll, almost a third of your supporters say your ability to lead the military is more of a weakness than a strength of yours. Why are you best prepared to be commander-in-chief?
I believe the principal job of the commander-in-chief is to keep America safe. And I think that's about judgment. I think it starts with knowing our military. I sit on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I work with our generals, with our military leaders, with our intelligence, but I also visit our troops. I visit our troops around the world. I've been to Afghanistan, to Iraq, to Jordan, to South Korea. I've been to lots of places to talk with our troops. And I fight for our troops to make sure that they get their pay, that they get the housing and medical benefits that they've been promised, that they don't get cheated by giant financial institutions. You know, I have 3 brothers who are in the military, and I know how much our military families sacrifice. But I also know that we have to think about our defense in very different ways. We have to think about cyber. We have to think about climate. We also have to think about how we spend money. We have a problem with a revolving door in Washington between the defense industry and the Department of Defense and the Pentagon. That is corruption, pure and simple. We need to block that revolving door, and we need to cut our defense budget. We need to depend on all of our tools, diplomatic, economic, working with our allies, and not let the defense industry call the shots.
Mr. Steyer, you worked in finance for decades and have never held elected office. Why should voters believe you have the experience or judgment to serve as commander-in-chief?
I worked internationally around the world for decades. I traveled, I met with governments, I met with businesses, and I understand how America interacts with other countries. And you asked, what is the reason that the experience really counts? And to me, I believe that Senator Warren made a great point. It isn't so much about experience, it's about judgment. If you've been listening to this, what we are hearing is 20 years of mistakes by the American government in the Middle East, of failure, of mistakes. So the real question is judgment. And if you look who had the judgment, it was a state senator from Illinois with no experience named Barack Obama who opposed the war. It is a congresswoman, Barbara Lee from Oakland, California, who stood up against the original vote, who was the only person in Congress. So I would say to you this, an outside perspective, looking at this and actually dealing with the problems as they are, is what we're looking for now. I agree with Senator Warren. We are spending dramatically too much money on defense. The money that we're spending there, we could spend in the other parts of the budget. And it's time for someone from the outside to have a strategic view about what we're trying to do and how to do it.
Senator Sanders, in the wake of the Iran crisis, Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei has again called for all U.S. troops to be pulled out of the Middle East, something you've called for as well. Yet when American troops last left Iraq, ISIS emerged and spread terror across the Middle East and indeed around the world. How would you prevent that from happening again?
Okay, let me tell you, but before I tell you that, let me tell you something else. And that is, and I don't know if my colleagues here will agree with me or not, maybe they will. But what we have to face as a nation is that the 2 great foreign policy disasters of our lifetimes were the war in Vietnam and the war in Iraq. Both of those wars were based on lies. And right now, what I fear very much is we have a president who is lying again and could drag us into a war that is even worse than the war in Iraq. To answer your question, what we need to do is have an international coalition. We cannot keep acting unilaterally. As you know, the nuclear deal with Iran was worked on with a number of our allies. We have got to undo what Trump did, bring that coalition together, and make sure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon.
Vice President Biden.
I was part of that deal to get the nuclear agreement with Iran, bringing together the rest of the world, including some of the folks who aren't friendly to us. And it was working. It was working. It was being held tightly. There was no movement on the part of the Iranian government to get closer to a nuclear weapon. And look what's happened. He went ahead, and it was predictable from the day he pulled out of that agreement, Trump, what exactly would happen. We're now isolated. We're in a situation where our allies in Europe are making a comparison between the United States and Iran, saying both ought to stand down, making a moral equivalence. We have lost our standing in the region. We have lost the support of our allies. The next president has to be able to pull those folks back together, reestablish our alliances, and insist that Iran go back into the agreement, which I believe with the pressure applied as we put on before, we can get done.
So just to be clear, Vice President Biden, would you leave troops in the Middle East or would you pull them out?
I would leave troops in the Middle East in terms of patrolling the Gulf, where we are now, small numbers of troops. And I think it's a mistake to pull out the small number of troops that are there now to deal with ISIS. What's happened is now that he's gone ahead, the president, and started this whole process moving, what's happening? ISIS is going to reconstitute itself. We're in a position where we have to pull our forces out. Americans have to leave the entire region. And quite frankly, I think he's flat out lied about saying the reason he went after, the reason he made the strike was because our embassies were about to be bombed.
Senator Klobuchar, what's your response?
I would leave some troops there, but not in the level that Donald Trump is taking us right now. Afghanistan, I have long wanted to bring our troops home. I would do that. Some would remain for counterterrorism and training. In Syria, I would not have removed 150 troops from the border with Turkey. I think that was a mistake. I think it made our allies and many others much more vulnerable to ISIS. And then when it comes to Iraq, right now, I would leave our troops there, despite the mess that has been created by Donald Trump. At the briefing we had last week, I was the only person on this stage that asked a question of both the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State. And I asked them about imminent threat, but I also asked them what their alternatives were. And they gave very vague answers. I asked them, where is the surge of diplomacy that we would be seeing if I was president? And I asked them where they were going to leave the Iraqi people. Time and time again, you see that this president puts his own interests, his private interests in front of our countries. I would put our country's interests first as Commander-in-Chief.
Senator Warren, leave combat troops, at least some combat troops in the Middle East, or bring them home?
No, I think we need to get our combat troops out. You know, we have to stop this mindset that we can do everything with combat troops. Our military is the finest military on earth, and they will take any sacrifice we ask them to take. But we should stop asking our military to solve problems that cannot be solved militarily. Our keeping combat troops there is not helping. We need to work with our allies. We need to use our economic tools. We need to use our diplomatic tools. Now, look, I understand. There are people on this stage, when it comes to Afghanistan, for example, who talk about 5 more years, 10 more years. Lindsey Graham talks about leaving troops there for 100 more years. No one has a solution and an end point. We need to get our combat troops out. They are not helping create more safety for the United States or the region.
Vice President Biden, is Senator Warren right?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a difference between combat troops and leading special forces in a position. I was part of the coalition that put together 68 countries to deal with stateless terror as well as failed states. Not us alone, 68 other countries. That's how we were able to defeat and end the caliphate for ISIS. They'll come back if we do not deal with them and we do not have someone who can bring together the rest of the world to go with us with small numbers of special forces we have to organize the effort to take them down.
Mayor Buttigieg, you served in Afghanistan. Who's right?
We can continue to remain engaged without having an endless commitment of ground troops. But what's going on right now is the president's actually sending more. The very president who said he was going to end endless war, who pretended to have been against the war in Iraq all along, but we know that's not true, now has more troops going to the Middle East. And whenever I see that happen, I think about the day we shipped out and the time that was set aside for saying goodbye to family members. I remember walking with a friend of mine, another lieutenant I trained with, as we walked away, and his 1.5-year-old boy was toddling after him, not understanding why his father wasn't turning back to scoop him up. And it took all the strength he had not to turn around and look at his boy one more time. That is happening by the thousands right now as we see so many more troops sent into harm's way. And my perspective is to ensure that that will never happen when there is an alternative as Commander-in-Chief.
Senator Sanders.
Well, in America today, our infrastructure is crumbling. Half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. 87 million people have no health care or are uninsured, underinsured. We got 500,000 people sleeping out on the streets tonight. The American people are sick and tired of endless wars, which have cost us trillions of dollars. Our job is to rebuild the United Nations, rebuild the State Department, make sure that we have the capability of bringing the world together to resolve international conflict diplomatically and stop the endless wars that we have experienced.
We're going to get to everyone, but Vice President Biden, you criticized President Trump's decision to kill the Iranian General Soleimani without first going to Congress. Are there any circumstances other than a direct attack on the United States where you would take military action without congressional approval?
I ran the first time as a 29-year-old kid against the war in Vietnam on the grounds that only way to take a nation to war is with the informed consent of the American people. The informed consent of the American people. And with regard to this idea that we can walk away and not have any troops anywhere, including special forces, there's no way you negotiate, have been able to negotiate with terrorists. You have to be able to form coalitions to be able to defeat them or contain them. If you don't, we end up being the world's policemen again. They're going to come to us. They've come to us before, they'll come to us again. So it's a fundamental difference than negotiating with other countries. It's fundamentally the requirement that we use our special forces in small numbers to coordinate with other countries to bring together coalitions.
Mr. Vice President, just to be clear, the Obama-Biden administration did not ask Congress for permission multiple times when it took military action. So would the Biden doctrine be different?
No, there was the authorization for the use of military force that was passed by the United States Congress, House and Senate, and signed by the president. That was the authority. It does not give authority to go into Iran. It gave authority to deal with these other issues.
Mayor Buttigieg.
That authorization needs to be replaced.
Exactly. We tried.
Look, when we lost troops in Niger, there were members of Congress who admitted they didn't even know we had troops there. And it was all pursuant to an authorization that was passed to deal with Al-Qaeda and 9/11. And often Congress has been all too happy to leave aside its role. Now, thanks to Democrats in Congress, that's changing. But the reality is, year after year, Congress didn't want to touch this either because it was so politically difficult. Fundamental truth is, if our troops can summon the courage to go overseas into harm's way, often on deployment after deployment, then we've got to make sure that Congress has the courage to take tough up or down votes on whether they ought to be there. And when I am president, anytime, which I hope will never happen, but anytime I'm compelled to use force and seek that authorization, we will have a 3-year sunset so that the American people are included not only in the decision about whether to send troops, but whether to continue.
Thank you. Senator Warren, we're going to get to everyone, but Senator Warren, what about you? Are there any circumstances other than a direct attack on the United States where you would take military action without congressional approval?
Well, imminent threat, but we need an authorization for the use of military force before we take this nation into combat. That is what the Constitution provides, and that's what as Commander-in-Chief I will do. But I just want to be clear. Everyone on this stage talks about nobody wants endless war. But the question is, when and how do you plan to get out of it? You know, on Senate Armed Services Committee, we have one general after another in Afghanistan who comes in and says, you know, we've just turned the corner and now it's all going to be different. And then what happens? It's all the same for another year. Someone new comes in and we've just turned the corner. We've turned the corner so many times we're going in circles in these regions. This has got to stop. It's not enough to say someday we're going to get out.
No one on the ground, none of our military can describe what the conditions are for getting out. It's time to get our combat troops home.
Mr. Steyer, would President Steyer use military force as a deterrent? And if not, under what circumstances would you take military action?
I would take military action to protect the lives and safety of American citizens. But what we can see in the Middle East and what this conversation shows is that there is no real strategy that we're trying to accomplish in what we're doing in the Middle East. Obviously, Mr. Trump has no strategy. He is going from crisis to crisis, from escalation to escalation. But if you look further over the last 20 years, including in the war in Afghanistan, we know from the Washington Post that in fact, there was no strategy. There was just a series of tactical decisions that made no sense. So we really have to ask ourselves in the Middle East, what are we trying to accomplish? I agree with Vice President Biden. To do it, we should definitely be doing it in coalition with other countries. And I want to point out that as we do that, we're confronted by this issue, which everyone is talking about. But at the same time, there's a gigantic climate issue in Australia, which also requires the same kind of value-driven coalition building that we actually should be using in the Middle East. We need to ask ourselves, how are we going to provide a world that is safer for Americans, where we can prosper more? And every single thing we do should follow into that strategy. And it's just not happening in Washington, D.C.
Mayor Buttigieg, another critical issue you'd face as president is the threat of nuclear weapons. Last week, President Trump said, quote, "As long as I'm president of the United States, Iran will never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon." Would a President Buttigieg make that same promise?
Ensuring that Iran does not develop nuclear weapons will, of course, be a priority because it's such an important part of keeping America safe. But unfortunately, President Trump has made it much harder for the next president to achieve that goal by gutting the Iran nuclear deal. One that, by the way, the Trump administration itself admitted was working, certified that it was preventing progress toward a nuclear Iran. By gutting that, they have made the region more dangerous and set off the chain of events that we're now dealing with as it escalates even closer to the brink of outright war. Now, in order to get that done, we've got to work with our partners. Iran nuclear deal, the technical term for it was the JCPOA. That first letter J stood for joint. We can't do this alone, even less so now, after everything that has happened, which is why it will be so critically important to engage leaders, including a lot of new leaders emerging around the world, and ensure that we have the alliances we need to meet what I believe is not just an American goal, but a widely shared goal around the world to ensure that Iran does not become a nuclear-armed country.
Mayor Buttigieg, to be clear, would you allow Iran to become a nuclear power, yes or no?
No, that our security depends on ensuring that Iran does not become nuclear. And by the way, we've got a lot of other challenges with nuclear proliferation around the world. Despite this president's coziness with Vladimir Putin, we actually seem to be further away from being able to work with Russia on things like the renewal of START. We've got to move toward less, not more, nuclear danger, whether it is from states, from stateless potential terrorist actors, or anywhere else around the world.
Thank you, Mayor Buttigieg. Senator Klobuchar, if you become president, it's very possible there won't be an Iran nuclear deal for the United States to rejoin. Given that, how would you prevent Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon?
I would start negotiations again, and I won't take that as a given that our European partners are still trying to hold the agreement together. My issue is that because of the actions of Donald Trump, we are in a situation where Iran is starting to enrich uranium again in violation of the original agreement. So what I would do is negotiate. I would bring people together, just as President Obama did years ago. And I think that we can get this done. But you have to have a president that sees this as a #1 goal. And in answer to the original question you asked the mayor, I would not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And then you have to get an agreement in place. I think there are changes you can make to the agreement, better sunset, some changes to the inspections. But overall, that is what we should do. And I am the one person on this debate stage on the first night of the very first debate when we were asked what we saw as the biggest threat to our world. I said China on the economy, but I said Iran because of Donald Trump, because I feared that exactly what happened would happen. Enrichment of uranium, escalation of tensions, leaving frayed relations with our allies. We can bring them back, understanding this is a terrorist regime that we cannot allow to have a nuclear weapon.
Vice President Biden, I want to ask you about North Korea. President Trump has met with Kim Jong-un 3 times. President Obama once said he would meet with North Korea without any preconditions. Would you meet with North Korea without any preconditions?
No, not now. I wouldn't meet with him without any preconditions. Look, what we gave him everything he's looking for. Legitimacy. The president showed up, met with him, gave him legitimacy, weakened the sanctions we have against him. I would be putting what I did as vice president. I met with Xi Jinping more than anyone else. I would be putting pressure on China to put pressure on Korea to cease and desist from their nuclear power, make their efforts to deal with nuclear weapons. I would move forward as we did before, and you reported it extensively, Wolf, about moving forward the whole notion of defense against nuclear weapons. That we would, and when China said to me, when Xi Jinping said to me, that's a threat to us, I said, we're going to move and protect our interests unless you get involved and protect it. I would reignite the relationship between Japan and South Korea, and I would put enormous pressure on China, because it's also in their interest for them to put pressure on North Korea to cease and desist. But I would not meet with, absent preconditions, I would not meet with the, quote, supreme leader who said, Joe Biden is a rabid dog. He should be beaten to death with a stick. I count that.
Other than that, you like him.
Other than that, I like him, and he got a love letter from Trump right after that.
Mr. Steyer, would you meet with North Korea without any preconditions?
No, it's very clear that if we're going to do something with North Korea, we're going to have to do it in concert with our allies. That meeting with him without preconditions is not going anywhere, that the staff can meet to try and see how far we can get. But this is a classic situation where the United States idea of going it alone makes no sense. And when you were talking about Iran, let's face it, Iran is under great pressure economically. So every single discussion we've had about Iran has had to do with military power and America versus Iran. Whereas in fact, what worked with President Obama was an alliance of our allies and us putting economic pressure on them for them to give up their military tactic. That to me is called strategy. Having a goal to make America safer by looking more broadly than just us as the policemen of the world spending money.
Let's stay with the theme of America's role in the world and talk about trade. Tomorrow, President Trump is expected to sign phase 1 of a trade agreement with China, and the Senate will likely soon approve a new trade deal with Mexico and Canada, Iowa's largest trading partners. Senator Sanders, you have said that new deal, the USMCA, quote, makes some modest improvements, yet you're going to vote against it. Aren't modest improvements better than no improvements for the farmers and manufacturers who have been devastated here in Iowa?
The answer is we could do much better than a Trump-led trade deal. This deal, and I think the proponents of it acknowledge, will result in the continuation of the loss of hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs as a result of outsourcing. The heart and soul of our disastrous trade agreements, and I'm the guy who voted against NAFTA and against permanent normal trade relations with China, is that we have forced American workers to compete against people in Mexico, in China, elsewhere, who earn starvation wages, $1 or $2 an hour. Second of all, every major environmental organization has said no to this new trade agreement because it does not even have the phrase climate change in it. And given the fact that climate change is right now the greatest threat facing this planet, I will not vote for a trade agreement that does not incorporate very, very strong principles to significantly lower fossil fuel emissions in the world.
But Senator Sanders, to be clear, the AFL-CIO supports this deal. Are you unwilling to compromise?
The AFL-CIO does, the Machinists Union does not, and every environmental organization in this country, including the Sunrise organization, who's supporting my candidacy, opposes it. So I happen to believe, and I hope we will talk about climate change in a moment, If we do not get our act together in terms of climate change, the planet that we're going to be leaving our kids and our children and our grandchildren will be increasingly unlivable
We're going
and
to get to climate
uninhabitable.
change, but I'd like to stay on trade. Senator
Well, they are
Warren,
the same in this issue.
Senator Warren, you support the USMCA. Why is Senator Sanders wrong?
I do. I wasn't here. I've been in Congress long enough to have voted against NAFTA, but I led the fight against the trade deal with Asia and the trade deal with Europe because I didn't think it was in the interests of the American people, the American workers, or environmental interests. But we have farmers here in Iowa who are hurting. And they are hurting because of Donald Trump's initiated trade wars. We have workers who are hurting because the agreements that have already been cut really don't have enforcement on workers' rights. This new trade deal is a modest improvement. Senator Sanders himself has said so. It will give some relief to our farmers. It will give some relief to our workers. I believe we accept that relief. We try to help the people who need help. And we get up the next day and fight for a better trade deal. We need a coherent trade policy. We need a policy that actually helps our workers, our farmers. We need them at the table, not just a trade policy written for big international companies. I'm ready to have that fight, but let's help the people.
Thank
who
you.
need
Senator
help right
Sanders,
now.
can you please respond to Senator Warren?
Well, I think that it is not so easy to put together new trade legislation. If this is passed, I think it will set us back a number of years. Senator Warren is right in saying we need to bring the stakeholders to the table. That is the family farmers here in Iowa and in Vermont and around the country. That is the environmental community. That is the workers. Bottom line here is I am sick and tired of trade agreements negotiated by the CEOs of large corporations.
Senator Klobuchar, I'd like to
doors.
bring you in here.
Dan, I want to hit reality here. I serve on the Agriculture Committee, and I will never forget going to Crawfordsville here in Iowa. And thank you for bringing up Iowa, Brianne, since that is where we are. And I went to this plant, and there was one worker left in that plant. That plant had been shut down because of Donald Trump's trade policies and because of what he had done to those workers with giving secret waivers to oil companies and ruining the renewable fuel standard. That worker brought out a coat rack of uniforms, and he said, "These are my friends. They don't work here anymore." And their names were embroidered on those uniforms: Derek, Mark, Salvador. And that guy started to cry. These are real people hurt by Donald Trump's trade war. So what we should do, and I support the USMCA, I am glad that these improvements were made that are supported by people like Richard Trumka and Sherrod Brown on labor and environment, and on pharma, the sweetheart deal, because I think we need a big trading
Senator
bloc with North
Klobuchar.
America to take on China. And the way you
Senator
are stronger
Klobuchar,
with
your
China
time is
is
up.
with your allies.
Mayor Buttigieg, do you support the USMCA? Yes or no?
Yes, it has been improved. It is not perfect. But when you sit down with the people who are most impacted, they share just how much harm has been done to them by things like the trade war, and just how much we can benefit American consumers and workers and farmers by making sure we have the right kind of labor and enforceability, as Democrats ensured we got in this USMCA. But let's acknowledge why there is such fear and frustration. You know, my part of the country, in the industrial Midwest, I remember when they came around in the 90s, selling trade deals, telling us, don't worry about your slice of the pie. The pie will get so much bigger that everyone will be better off. And that promise was broken. The part about the pie getting bigger happened. It's just that the part about it getting to most people where I live did not. That is why there is such frustration. The sense that these decisions in boardrooms and in committee rooms in Washington are being made not based on what's best
Thank you,
for
Mayor
us,
Buttigieg.
but based on their own game.
Vice President Biden, Senator Sanders has said Donald Trump will, quote, eat your lunch for voting yes on what he calls terrible trade agreements. When it comes to trade, why are you the best candidate to take on President Trump?
There will be no trade agreement signed in my administration without environmentalists and labor at the table. And there will be no trade agreement until we invest more in American workers. We should be putting our money and our effort and our time in preparing American workers to compete in the 21st century on the high-tech side, dealing with all artificial intelligence. We should be focusing on equipping American workers to do that. And by the way, The idea, I don't know that there's any trade agreement that the senator would ever think made any sense. But the problem is that 95% of the customers are out there. So we better figure out how we begin to write the rules of the road, not China.
Senator Sanders.
Joe and I have a fundamental disagreement here. In case you haven't noticed. And that is NAFTA, PNTR with China, other trade agreements were written for one reason alone. And that is to increase the profits of large multinational corporations. And the end result of those two, just PNTR with China, Joe, and NAFTA, cost us some 4 million jobs as part of the race to the bottom. I am sick and tired and will not tolerate. And we will use the power of the federal contracting system. If a corporation in America wants to shut down in Iowa or Vermont or any place else, and then they think they're going to get online for a generous federal contract, they've got another thing going. We need some corporate responsibility here, and we need to protect good-paying jobs in America, not see them go to China, Mexico, Vietnam.
Mr. Vice President, what's your response?
We need corporate responsibility, and I agree with that completely. But we also need to have enforcement mechanisms in the agreements we make. Enforceable agreements. That's one of the things that has been improved with the trade agreement with Mexico, and that's what we should be doing in any agreement we have. But let's get back to the basics here. If we don't set the rules of the road by going out to our partners instead of poking our eye in poking our finger in the eye of all our friends and allies, we make up 25% of the world's economy. We got to bring the other 25% of our allies along with us to set the rules of the road so China cannot continue to abuse their power by stealing our intellectual property and doing all the other things using their corporate state system to our significant disadvantage.
Senator Warren.
You know, our problem is not just that we need corporate responsibility. It's been the structure of how these trade deals have been negotiated. The United States has had a strategy for decades, and that strategy has been to have government trade negotiators, a small number, and then surround them with giant multinational corporation lobbyists and corporate executives who whisper in the ears of our negotiators and then get deals cut that are great for the giant multinational corporations, not good for America, not good for American workers, not good for the environment. We need a different approach to trade, and it starts by calling out the corruption of these giant corporations that have cut our trade deals. Everybody wants to get to the American market, and we need to put some standards in place. You want to be able to sell your goods here, then you've got to meet some environmental standards. You've got to meet labor standards. We
I'd
need
like to
a
bring in Mr.
coherent
Steyer
approach.
here. Mr. Steyer, even though farmers and manufacturers here in Iowa and around the country could see some relief from the China deal, they've been crushed by the current administration's trade war. What will you do as president to help them get back on their feet?
Look, on the first day, I would undo Mr. Trump's tariffs. On the first day, I would get rid of his waivers that Senator Klobuchar was referring to oil refiners, so not having to use corn-based ethanol. In fact, these trade deals have been exactly what Senator Sanders and Warren have been saying, which is that they've been designed to grow the American GDP for the corporations of America, not for the working people of America, and not to protect the climate. So let me say this. I'm the only person on this stage who says climate's my #1 priority. I would not sign this deal because if climate's your #1 priority, you can't sign a deal, even if it's marginally better for working people, until climate is also taken into consideration. Look, I've got 4 kids between the ages of 26 and 31. I cannot allow this country to go down the path of climate destruction. Everybody in their generation knows it. Frankly, Mayor Buttigieg, you're their generation. I think you would be standing up more. Look, that's why I'm standing up for it. We cannot put climate on the back seat all the time and say, we're going to sign this one more deal. We're going to do one more thing without putting climate first. That's why it's my #1 priority. We can do it in a way that makes us richer, but we have to do it.
Mayor Buttigieg, your response?
Well, that's right. This issue is personal for me. It's why we're going to tackle climate from day one. It's why we've got to make sure that we have better answers than we do today. Now, what I've noticed is pretty much all of us propose that we move on from fossil fuels by the middle of the century, starting with actions that we take right now. The question is, are we going to make sure any of this actually gets done? Because people have been saying the right things in these debates for literally decades. The other day in Winterset, there was a kid at one of my events, raised his hand, and he pointed out that he expects to be here in his 90s in the year 2100. He will sit in judgment over what we do, not just what we on this stage do. Anyone old enough to vote right now, whether we actually put together the national project it will require to meet our climate goals, to act aggressively, not just rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, that's table stakes, but to actually move on from the fossil-dependent economy we live in today.
Thank you. Let's now turn to an issue that's come up in the last 48 hours. Senator Sanders. CNN reported yesterday that, and Senator Warren confirmed in a statement that in 2018 you told her that you did not believe that a woman could win the election. Why did you say that?
Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't say it. And I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on this, because this is what Donald Trump and maybe some of the media want. Anybody knows me, knows that it's incomprehensible that I would think that a woman could not be president of the United States. Go to YouTube today. There's some video of me 30 years ago talking about how a woman could become president of the United States. In 2015, I deferred, in fact, to Senator Warren. There was a movement to draft Senator Warren to run for president. And you know what? I said, stayed back. Senator Warren decided not to run, and I did run afterwards. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. How could anybody in a million years not believe that a woman could become president of the United States? And let me be very clear. If any of the women on this stage or any of the men on this stage win the nomination, I hope that's not the case. I hope it's me. But if they do, I will do everything in my power to make sure that they are elected in order to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of our country.
So Senator Sanders, I do want to be clear here. You're saying that you never told Senator Warren that a woman could not win the election.
That is correct.
Senator Warren, what did you think when Senator Sanders told you a woman could not win the election?
I disagreed. Bernie is my friend, and I'm not here to try to fight with Bernie. But look, this question about whether or not a woman can be president has been raised, and it's time for us to attack it head on. And I think the best way to talk about who can win is by looking at people's winning record. So, can a woman beat Donald Trump? Look at the men on this stage. Collectively, they have lost 10 elections. The only people on this stage who have won every single election that they've been in are the women, Amy and me. And the only person on this stage who has beaten an incumbent Republican anytime in the past 30 years is me. And here's what I know. The real danger that we face as Democrats is picking a candidate who can't pull our party together, or someone who takes for granted big parts of the Democratic constituency. We need a candidate who will excite all parts of the Democratic Party, bring everyone in, and give everyone a Democrat to believe in. That's my plan, and that is why I'm going to win.
Senator Klobuchar,
Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar, what do you say to
Thank
people
you,
who
Elizabeth.
don't- Senator Klobuchar, what
Yes,
do you say?
I would like to
Senator
point out.
Klobuchar, let me finish my question.
Oh, okay.
What do you say to people who
I thought it was such an open end. I wasn't at the meeting, so I can't comment, but I was gonna.
What do you say to people who say that a woman can't win this election?
I hear that. People have said it. That's why I've addressed it from this stage. I point out that you don't have to be the tallest person in the room. James Madison was 5'4". You don't have to be the skinniest person in the room. You don't have to be the loudest person. You have to be competent. And when you look at the facts, Michigan has a woman governor right now, and she beat a Republican, Gretchen Whitmer. Kansas has a woman governor right now, and she beat Chris Kobach. And her name is, I'm very proud to know her, and her name is Governor Kelly. Thank you. Third, I would add to this, You have to be competent to win, and you have to know what you're doing. And when you look at what I have done, I have won every race, every place, every time. I have won in the reddest of districts. I have won in the suburban areas, in the rural areas. I have brought people with me. That is why I have the most endorsements of current Iowa legislators and former Iowa legislators in this race.
Thank you.
Because I know I bring people with me. And finally, every single person that I have beaten, my Republican opponents, have gotten out of politics for good. And I think that sounds pretty good. I think that sounds pretty good with the guy we have in the White House right now.
Senator Sanders, you can
Well,
respond.
just to set the record straight, I defeated an incumbent Republican running for Congress.
When?
1990. That's how I won, beat a Republican congressman. Number two, of
30
course,
years
I
ago.
don't think there's any debate up here.
What, wasn't it 30 years ago?
I beat an incumbent Republican congressman.
And I said, I was the only one who's beaten an incumbent Republican in 30 years.
Well, 30 years ago is 1990, as a matter of fact. But I don't know that that's the major issue of the day. I think what the major issue of the day is, does anybody in their right mind think that a woman cannot be elected president? That's enough. Nobody believes that. If Hillary Clinton got 3 million votes, more votes than Trump. So who believes that a woman can't win? Of course a woman can win. But the real question is, how do we beat Trump? And the only way we beat Trump is by a campaign of energy and excitement, and a campaign that has by far the largest voter turnout in the history of this country. And I believe that our campaign has the strongest grassroots movement.
Thank
We have
you.
been endorsed by many
Senator
grassroots
Warren,
organizations.
Senator
That's why
Warren,
we
I
win.
want to give you the final word.
So I do think it's the right question. How do we beat Trump? And here's the thing. Since Donald Trump was elected, women candidates have outperformed men candidates in competitive races. And in 2018, we took back the House, we took back state houses because of women candidates and women voters. Look, don't deny that the question is there. Back in the 1960s, people asked, could a Catholic win? Back in 2008, people asked if an African American could win. In both times, the Democratic Party stepped up and said yes, got behind their candidate, and we changed America. That's who we are.
Vice President Biden. Vice President Biden, go ahead.
I agree, women can win, and I went in a campaign for 27 of them this last in 2018, the best group I've ever campaigned for in terms of competence. But the real issue is who can bring the whole party together. It represents all elements of the party. African Americans, brown, black, women, men, gay, straight. The fact of the matter is that I would argue that in terms of endorsements around the country, endorsements wherever we go, I am the one who has the broadest coalition of anyone running up here in this race.
All right, we're going to take a short break now. The CNN Democratic presidential debate live from Drake University. We'll be right back after this.
All the signs say you're ready for college. We're here to help. Bryant and Stratton College, for every and in life.
At Verizon, we keep companies ready for what's next. We weave security into their business.
Virtualize their operations.
Keep them ready for the next big opportunity, like 5G. When it comes to digital transformation, Verizon keeps business ready.
What does help for heart failure look like? It looks like this. Entresto is a heart failure pill that helps keep people alive and out of the hospital. Don't take Entresto if pregnant. It can cause harm or death to an unborn baby. Don't take Entresto with an ACE inhibitor or allospirin, or if you've had angioedema with an ACE or ARB. The most serious side effects are angioedema, low blood pressure, kidney problems, or high blood potassium. Ask your doctor about Entresto. Yeah.
be their side. Oh, take me back to the start.
The Windsors, Inside the Royal Dynasty, premieres Sunday, February 16th at 10 on CNN.
I've been a war correspondent for more than 10 years, and every conflict that you can think of, I have never seen anything like this. This is happening right here, right now. Life is dangerous. There are snipers all around. You've got to do justice to the story. How many hours have you been on the boat? You can't not feel some level of personal impact.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing? Do you get the anger that is out here? They closed off this entire street.
Do you really think you're a champion of the gay community?
Sir, with all due respect, that's the argument of a 5-year-old.
I didn't start it. All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're a part of what I do every night right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, weeknights at 8 only on CNN.
I'm Bill Weir from CNN.
How many people are in these kind of conditions?
Climate change is here.
Imagine that wall of flames. This just happened. I've never seen anything like this.
This happened.
Death is to survive.
I heard Grace for you.
You must get it right. It's life.
CNN International is open to the world.
I'm Christiana Montour in Helsinki, Finland. I'm Becky Anderson in Abu Dhabi.
I'm here in a remote part of southern India.
From the New York Stock Exchange, Port Elizabeth, Birmingham, Puerto Rico, Hong Kong, London,
Damascus, Jerusalem.
absolutely, Nairobi.
Go international, anytime, anywhere, from selected devices.
Hello.
Or said before we've even started.
CNN Go International.
I've been pretty stable with my schizophrenia for a while. And then my kids asked me why my body was rocking back and forth. My doctor said I have tardive dyskinesia, which may be related to the important medications I take for my schizophrenia. I also felt my tongue darting and pushing against my cheeks. I was glad to learn that today, TD is manageable.
Uh-oh.
What?
That just went away.
CNN?
Commercial break in progress. CNN Go will resume momentarily. Ah, okay. We're okay. No Hunger Games. No Hunger Games. That's funny. I don't know, guys. I think we're doomed. I think our country's doomed. I'm just saying. We gotta get this crazy out of the White House. And he should take his whole clan with him. Take them all. Uh-oh. Page unresponsive. Wait. Uh-oh, I might be in trouble here. It says commercial break going, so I don't know. But I'm not buying it. I think maybe I'm in trouble.
Check on my phone.
Okay, thanks. Oh. Oh, it's not on. Thank you, Beats Box Street. Oh, he says yes. Steve, oh my God. People want to say Bernie. Okay, open up. Sorry, guys. Let me see. Oh, something's going on. No, I think. Okay.
Wait.
Okay.
Welcome
Now we're gonna be off,
to the
but-
CNN Democratic Presidential Debate live from Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa.
Let's turn to healthcare, the top issue for Iowa Democrats. Donald Trump is trying to repeal Obamacare, including the protections for pre-existing conditions. We all know that each of you vigorously opposes that. Still, there are some questions about what each of you would do. Senator Sanders, you've consistently refused to say exactly how much your Medicare for All plan is going to cost. Don't voters deserve to see the price tag before you send them a bill that could cost tens of trillions of dollars?
Well, what I will tell you is Medicare for All, which will guarantee comprehensive health care to every man, woman, and child, will cost substantially less than the status quo. Medicare for All will end the absurdity of the United States paying by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs and healthcare in general. While we have 87 million uninsured and uninsured and underinsured, and while 30,000 people die each year. Under Medicare for All, one of the provisions we have to pay for it is a 4% tax on income, exempting the first $29,000. So the average family in America that today makes $60,000 would pay $1,200 a year, compared to that family paying $12,000 a year. We save money, comprehensive health care, because we take on the greed and the profiteering and the administrative nightmare that currently exists in our dysfunctional system.
Vice President Biden, does Senator Sanders owe voters a price tag on his health care plan?
I think we need to be candid with voters. I think we have to tell them what we're going to do and what it's going to cost. And the 4% tax on income over $24,000 doesn't even come close to paying for between 30 and some estimates as high as $40 trillion over 10 years. That's doubling the entire federal budget per year. There's a way to do that. The way to do that is to take Obamacare, reinstate, rebuild it, provide a public option, allow Medicare for those folks who want it, and in fact, make sure that we, in the process, reduce the cost of drug prices, reduce the cost of being able to buy into the subsidize it further, and make it everybody available to everyone. Here's the deal. That costs a lot of money. That costs $740 billion over 10 years. I lay out how I pay for that.
Senator Sanders?
Well, first of all, what Joe forgets to say is when you leave the current system as it is, what you are talking about are workers paying, on average, 20% of their incomes for healthcare. That is insane. You got 500,000 people going bankrupt because they cannot pay their medical bills. We're spending twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of any other country. Look, we've talked about healthcare for all in this country for over 100 years. Now is the time to take on the greed and corruption of the healthcare industry, of the drug companies, and finally provide healthcare to all through a Medicare for all single-payer program. It won't be easy, but that is what we have to do.
You can do it without that. You can do it without Medicare for all. You can get the same place.
Senator Klobuchar, your response.
Yeah, Senator Sanders and I have worked together on pharmaceuticals for a long, long time, and we agree on this. But what I don't agree with is that his position on healthcare. This debate isn't real. I was in Vegas the other day and someone said, don't put your chips on a number on the wheel that isn't even on the wheel. That's the problem. Over 2/3 of the Democrats in the U.S. Senate are not on the bill that you and Senator Warren are on. You have numerous governors that are Democratic that don't support this. You have numerous House members that put Nancy Pelosi in the speaker. The answer is a nonprofit public option. The answer is the real debate we should be having is how do we make it easier for people to get coverage for addiction and mental health? I have a plan for that. And then finally, what should we do about long-term care? The elephant that doesn't even fit in this room. We need to make it easier for people to get long-term care insurance. We need to make it easier for them to pay for their premiums. My own dad, I know when his long-term care insurance ends. And then we have some savings for him. He's in assisted living. He got married 3 times, whole nother story, so there isn't much there. But then we go to Medicaid, and I have already talked to Catholic Elder Care. They're willing to take him in. Our story is better than so many other families. We have to make it easier for long-term care. It's not just for seniors, it's also for the sandwich generation, people trying to help their parents.
Senator Warren.
So we need to start with what's happening in America. People are suffering. I'll just pick one. 36 million people last year went to the doctor, got a prescription. This is what they needed to get well, and they couldn't afford to have the prescription filled. They looked at it and said, it's either groceries or this prescription. My approach to this is we've got to get as much help to as many people as quickly as possible. I have worked out a plan where we can do that without raising taxes on middle-class families by one thin dime. What I can do are the things I can do as president on the first day. We can cut the cost of prescription drugs. I'll use the power that's already given to the president to reduce the cost of insulin and EpiPens and HIV/AIDS drugs. Let's get some relief to those families, and I will defend the Affordable Care Act. I've got a plan to expand healthcare, but let's keep in mind, when we come to a general election, we Democrats may argue among each other about the best way to do healthcare, but we're going to be up against a Republican incumbent who has cut healthcare for millions of people and is still trying to do that. I'll take our side of the argument any day. We're going to beat him on this.
Vice President Biden.
The proposal I lay out does in fact limit drug costs. It sets up, it allows all the drug companies, it allows you to Medicare to negotiate with drug companies for the price. It sets a system whereby you cannot raise the price of a drug beyond the cost of medical inflation. And by the way, there's mental health parity that I call for in the Obamacare expanded with the Biden option.
Mr. Steyer?
Look, we've had this conversation on this stage so many times. Everybody on this stage believes that affordable health care is a right for every single American. Everybody on this stage knows that Americans are paying twice as much for health care as any other advanced country in the world, and it makes no sense, and the government has to step in. I do happen to agree with Vice President Biden that we should move and develop the Affordable Care Act with a public option. But the real question is this. This is not a new problem. Why do we keep having this conversation? We have a broken government. It has been bought by corporations that include the drug companies, the insurance companies, and the private hospitals.
Yep.
That's what I'm talking about. How do we get back government of, by, and for the people? How do we actually break the corporate stranglehold on our government so that we can get any of these things passed?
Thank you, Mr. Steyer. Senator Sanders, your campaign proposals would double federal spending over the next decade, an unprecedented level of spending not seen since World War II. How would you keep your plans from bankrupting the country?
Our plan wouldn't bankrupt the country, and in fact, it would much improve the well-being of working class families and the middle class. Let us be clear what Medicare for All does. It ends all premiums. It ends all co-payments. It ends the absurdity of deductibles. It ends out-of-pocket expenses. It takes on the pharmaceutical industry, which in some cases charges us 10 times more for the same prescription drugs sold abroad as sold here. What we will do through a Medicare for All single payer program is substantially lower the cost of healthcare for employers and workers, because we end the $100 billion a year that the healthcare industry makes and the $500 billion a year we spend in administrative, the administrative nightmare of dealing with thousands of separate insurance plans. Healthcare is a human right. Every other major country on earth is guaranteeing healthcare for all. The time is long overdue for us to do the same.
Senator Klobuchar.
Again, I think it is much better to build on the Affordable Care Act. And if you want to be practical and progressive at the same time and have a plan and not a pipe dream, you have to show how you're going to pay for it. And I would also note practically that the Affordable Care Act right now is 10 points more popular than the President of the United States. So I think the answer is to build on it. And yes, I think you should show how you're going to pay for things, Bernie. I do. This president is treating people out there like poker chips in one of his bankrupt casinos, the way he is adding to our debt. I am the one person up here who has on her website, in her plan, a plan to actually start taking on the deficit by taking part of that money from that corporate tax cut that they put in there and putting it in a fund to pay back the deficit. And I have shown how I'm going to pay for every single plan. Capital gains tax, going to the personal level, getting rid of the oil giveaways, doing something about the hedge fund loophole. You can go through it and you can get the money to pay for things.
Mayor Buttigieg, you're selling your plan as Medicare for all who want it, yet your plan would automatically enroll uninsured Americans into a public option, even if they don't want it, and force them to pay for it. How is that truth in advertising?
Well, it's making sure that there is no such thing as an uninsured American. Look, the individual mandate was an important part of the ACA because the system doesn't work if there are free riders. What I'm offering is a choice. You don't have to be in my plan if there's another plan that you would rather keep. And there's no need to kick Americans off the plans that they want in order to deliver health care for all. And my plan is paid for. Look, our party should no longer hesitate to talk about the issue of the debt and the deficit. And we've got a dramatically better track record on it than Republicans do. In my lifetime, it's almost invariably Republican presidents who have added to the deficit, $1 trillion under this president. And it's why everything I've put forward, from Medicare for all who want it, to the historic investments we're going to make in infrastructure, to dealing with climate change, is fully paid for. When it comes to healthcare, you can do it in 2 moves. Of course, my plan costs $1.5 trillion over a decade. No small sum, but not the 20, 30, 40 that we're hearing about from the others. All I got to do is 2 things. Both of them are common sense. Allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices and roll back the Trump corporate tax cuts that went to corporations and the wealthy that didn't even need it.
Senator Warren.
So I started this by talking about 36 million Americans, including Americans with insurance, who just can't even afford to have a prescription filled. We all talk about plans, healthcare plans that we have, and these plans are paid for. The problem is that plans like the mayor's and like the vice president's is that they are an improvement. They are an improvement over where we are right now, but they're a small improvement. And that's why it is that they cost so much less, because by themselves, they're not going to be enough to cover prescriptions for 36 million people who can't afford to get them filled. What we need to do is make the commitment that we know where the money comes from. We can ask those at the very top, the top 1%, to pay a little more. Those giant corporations like Chevron and Amazon who paid nothing in taxes, we can have them pay. And we can go after the corporate tax cheats. And when we do that, we have enough money to provide health care for all our people. Yes, we build on the Affordable Care Act, but where we end up is we offer health care to all of our people. And we can offer it at no cost or low cost to all of them.
Mayor Buttigieg.
It's just not true that the plan I'm proposing is small. We got to move past a Washington mentality that suggests that the bigness of plans only consists of how many trillions of dollars they put through the Treasury, that the boldness of a plan only consists of how many Americans it can alienate. This would be a game changer. This would be the biggest thing we've done to American healthcare in a half century. Let's measure the effects of our plans based on what they would do in our everyday lives. And yes, we're taking on cost. On prescription drugs, we'll have an out-of-pocket cap, even if you don't get the subsidies that would make it free, a $250 monthly cap. And here's why it's got to be monthly. You ever been in that situation or known somebody who finds that they've got to defer a procedure or delay filling a prescription to try to have it happen in the right month? Because when your out-of-pocket cap hits, it makes no sense medically, because most of us don't experience the economy on an annual basis. Our bills don't come in every year, they come in every month. Same with our paychecks, bi-weekly or monthly. That's why we set this up in a way to solve the problem without running up 20, 30, $40 trillion.
Senator Warren, your response?
Look, the numbers that the mayor's offering just don't add up. The average family in America last year paid $12,000 in some combination of deductibles and co-pays and uncovered expenses and fees. You can't cover that with the kind of money that the mayor is talking about. The way we have to approach this is we've got to build this, and we've got to build the alliances to make this happen. I can bring down the cost of prescription drugs like insulin and take hundreds of millions of dollars out of the system immediately in costs. We can get help to families, but we have to be willing to work together. We can let people experience what healthcare is like when it's you and your doctor, your mental health professional, your nurse practitioner with no insurance company standing in the middle. When people
Senator Warren, you acknowledged that Medicare for all, that you couldn't get there right away. You got on the bill that said on page 8, which is why I didn't get on it, that you would kick 149 million Americans off their current health insurance. Then a few months ago, you said, no, you're going to wait a while to get there. And I think that was some acknowledgement that maybe what we're talking about is true. And I don't buy that it's not enough. It is a big, big step to say to people making $100,000 a year that your premiums will be cut in half, which is what the nonprofit public option will do. And if you talk, Mayor Buttigieg, about Medicare and having negotiation, I actually have led that bill for years. I have 34 co-sponsors. As president, I can get it done. That would allow Medicare to finally negotiate and lift the ban that Big Pharma got into law that says it can't negotiate for better prices for our seniors. I will get it done.
Senator Sanders, coming to you now. CNN reached out to Iowa Democratic voters for their most pressing questions. Edward from here in Des Moines writes, Des Moines is an insurance town. What happens to all the insurance industry, the health insurance industry here, if there is Medicare for all? What happens to all the jobs and the livelihoods of the people that live in insurance towns like Des Moines?
We build into our Medicare for All program a transition fund of many, many billions of dollars that will provide for up to 5 years income and health care and job training for those people. But here is the issue. Tom Steyer made the point a moment ago. We are now spending twice as much per person on healthcare as do the people of any other country. That is insane. In some cases, 10 times more for prescription drugs. Why is that? Why is that? And the answer is the greed and corruption of the drug companies and the insurance companies. And if we want to do what every other major country on earth does and guarantee people healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. You know what we have to do? We are finally going to have to stand up to the healthcare industry and end hundreds of billions of dollars of waste and profiteering.
Mr. Steyer.
I just want to emphasize what Senator Sanders said. This is not a complicated problem. Between what Senator Warren and Senator Sanders said, it's clear. There are two problems. We're spending way too much because corporations own the system, and we're not negotiating against those corporations. And we've given tax cuts to the richest Americans and the biggest corporations for decades. That's all this is. We have corporations who are having their way with the American people, and people are suffering. Senator Warren is right. This is cruelty for money. In order to break this, we're going to have to break the corporate stranglehold and solve both the tax and the negotiating problem. That's why I'm for term limits. We need to redo Washington, D.C. and actually take back the government from the corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Steyer. Vice President Biden.
I would argue that the biggest breakthrough in recent time was us being able to do in our administration what five Democratic presidents couldn't get done, and that is pass Obamacare. It was a big deal. Secondly, I would argue that the way you control drug prices is you limit what they can charge for those prices. You don't have to pay the price, limit what they can charge. If in fact they charge more than we set the price for, they can in fact, people can import from abroad, assuming that it is safe. We in fact, it's only yellow, okay? And we can in fact do all of this and still provide people the option to stay, the roughly 150, 160 million Americans who like the negotiated plan they have with their employers. If they don't like it or the employer gets rid of it, they can buy into a Medicare plan in the Biden plan.
Let's talk a little bit more about prescription drugs right now. Prescription drug prices in 2018, Americans spent $335 billion on prescription drugs alone. That's about $60 billion more than they paid a decade ago. Senator Warren, you've called for the creation of a government-run drug manufacturer that would step in if there is a drug shortage or a price spike. Why does it make sense for the government to manufacture drugs, especially when public trust in government is near historic lows?
So let's do this both ways. What I also have said is I'm just going to use the power that is available, and I will do what a president can do all by herself on the very first day, and that is lower the prices of certain prescription drugs. I will lower the price of insulin. We already have the legal authority with the president to do that. President just hasn't picked up and used it. I will lower the price of EpiPens, of HIV, AIDS drugs. That's going to bring a lot of relief to a lot of families immediately. But you know, there are a whole lot of drugs, about 90% of drugs, that are not under patent. They're generic drugs. But the drug industry has figured out how to manipulate this industry to keep jerking the prices up and up and up. So my view is, let's give them a little competition. The government lets contracts for all kinds of things. They let contracts to build buildings. They let contracts to build military weapons. Let's let the contracts out, put the contracts out so that we can put more generic drugs out there and drive down those prices. This is a way to make markets work, not to try to move away from the market. You don't have to even use price controls. The whole idea behind it is get some competition out there so the price of these drugs that are no longer under patent drops where it should be.
Senator Klobuchar, do you believe the government should be manufacturing drugs?
I am open to looking at it, but I would try these things first. Number one, I mentioned the Medicare negotiation. Number two, I have a plan, 137 things I found that a president can do herself in the first 100 days without Congress that are legal. And one of those things is that you can start bringing in less expensive drugs from other countries. Bernie and I had an amendment on this. We got 14 Republican votes on it. It was at midnight. They might have not known what they were voting for, but we got that. I now have an actual bill with Senator Grassley that does that. And I have a bill to get at what Elizabeth was talking about, which is to stop generics from taking money from big pharmaceuticals to keep their products off the market. The issue here is that there are 2 pharma lobbyists for every member of Congress.
Thank you, Senator.
They think they own Washington. No. They don't own me.
Thank
and
you,
as president, I will get this done.
We're going to turn now to childcare, a huge expense for many new families and a problem that's especially acute in rural Iowa. We have another question from an Iowa Democratic voter. Mayor Buttigieg, this is for you. Tiffany from Clive writes, as a young mom, I had to quit a job I loved because childcare costs were taking up 2/3 of my income. Many families don't have the option of quitting a job because that little bit of income is needed. That leads to families using whatever care they can find, and sometimes the results are deadly, as we've seen in Iowa over the last few years. How will you prioritize accessing quality, affordable childcare in your first 100 days in office?
It makes no sense for childcare to cost 2/3 of somebody's income. We've got to drive it to 7% or below, and 0 for those families who are living in poverty. But this is happening to folks at every level of the income spectrum. Meet professionals who sometimes say that they're working in order to be able to afford childcare in order to be able to be working. It makes no sense, and it must change, and we shouldn't be afraid to put federal dollars into making that a reality. Subsidizing childcare and making sure that we're building up a workforce of people who are paid at a decent level to offer early childhood education as well as childcare writ large. We can do that. And until we do, this will be one of the biggest drivers of the gender pay gap. Because when somebody like the voter asking the question has to step out of the workforce because of that reason, she is at a disadvantage when she comes back in, and that can affect her pay for the rest of her career.
Senator Warren, your education plan includes tuition-free public college for all, but you impose an income limit for free childcare. Why do your plans cover everyone for public college, but not childcare and early learning?
No, actually, my plan is universal childcare for everyone. It just has some people adding a small payment. But understand this about the plan. I've been there. You know, I remember when I was a young mom, I had 2 little kids, and I had my first real university teaching job. It was hard work. I was excited, but it was childcare that nearly brought me down. We went through one childcare after another, and it just didn't work. If I hadn't been saved by my Aunt B, I was ready to quit my job. And I think about how many women of my generation just got knocked off the track and never got back on. How many of my daughter's generation get knocked off the track and don't get back on. How many mamas and daddies today are getting knocked off the track and never get back on. I have a 2-cent wealth tax so that we can cover childcare for all of our children and provide universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in America, and stop exploiting the people who do this valuable work, largely Black and brown women. We can raise the wages of every childcare worker and preschool teacher in America. That's an investment in our babies. That's an investment in their mamas and their daddies, and it's an investment in our teachers and in our economy.
Senator Sanders, will your universal child care program be free for everyone regardless of income?
Yeah. Let me pick up on this child care thing. Every psychologist in the world knows 0 through 4 are the most important years of human life, intellectually and emotionally. And yet our current child care system is an embarrassment. It is unaffordable. Child care workers are making wages lower than McDonald's workers. We need to fundamentally change priorities in America. We should not be one of the few countries that does not have universal, high-quality, affordable childcare. We should not be one of the only major countries not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right. We should not be spending more than the 10 next countries on the military, hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies for the fossil fuel industry, tax breaks for billionaires, and then tell the moms and dads in this country
Thank
we
you,
cannot have
Senator.
high-quality,
Vice President
affordable
Biden, I'm coming to you now.
That is wrong.
Vice President Biden, infant care is more expensive than in-state public college tuition in more than half the country. Do you support free universal infant care?
That's insane.
It should be free universal infant care, but here's the deal. You know, I was a single parent too. When my wife and daughter were killed, my 2 boys I had to raise, I was a senator, a young senator, I just hadn't been sworn in yet. And I was making $42,000 a year. I commuted every single solitary day to Wilmington, Delaware, over 500 miles a day, 250 miles a day, because I could not afford, but for my family, childcare. It was beyond my reach to be able to do it. And that's why there's several things we do. When I tripled the amount of money for Title I schools, every child 3, 4, and 5 years old will, in fact, have full schooling. They'll go to school and after-school programs, which will release some of the burden. Secondly, I think we should have an $8,000 tax credit, which would put 7 million women back to work. They could afford to go to work and still care for their children as an $8,000 tax credit. I also believe that we should, in fact, for people who, in fact, are not able to afford any of the infant care, to be able to get that care. But Bernie's right. We have to raise the salaries of the people who are doing the care. And I provide for that as well. My time is up, I know, but I'm not going to go over like everybody.
Mayor Buttigieg.
Damn.
Mayor Buttigieg, higher education is another huge expense for families. You oppose free public college for all because you don't want to make it, quote, free for the kids of millionaires. But lots of public services are available to the kids of rich people, like libraries and public schools. Why do you draw the line at public colleges and universities?
Well, it's simple. We expect and hope for everyone to get through 12th grade. It's not the same for college. Now, again, I don't want cost ever to be a barrier to somebody seeking to attend college. And under my plan, it won't be. Matter of fact, for the first 80% of Americans by income, it is free at public colleges. But if you're in that top income bracket, don't get me wrong, I still wish you well. I hope you succeed when you go to college. I just need you to go ahead and pay that tuition, because we could be using those dollars for something else. There is a very real choice about what we do with every single taxpayer dollar that we raise. And we need to be using that to support everybody, whether you go to college or not, making sure that Americans can thrive, investing in infrastructure, and something that hasn't come up very much tonight, but deserves a lot of attention, poverty. You know, the Poor People's Campaign is marching on Iowa right now, calling on us to talk about this issue more. They are driven by their faith. I think because even though in politics we're supposed to talk middle class, they know there's no scripture that says, as you've done unto the middle class, so you've done unto me. We got to be making sure that we target our tax dollars where they will make the biggest difference. And I don't think subsidizing the children of millionaires and billionaires to pay absolutely zero in tuition of public colleges is the best use of those scarce taxpayer dollars.
So look, the way I think we need to do this is we need a wealth tax in America. We need to ask people with fortunes above $50 million to pay more. And that means that the lowliest millionaire that I would tax under this wealth tax would be paying about $19 million in the first year in taxes. If he wants to send his kid to public university, then I'm okay with that. Because what we really need to talk about is the bigger economic picture here. We need to be willing to put a wealth tax in place, to ask those giant corporations that are not paying to pay, because that's how we build an economy. And for those who want to talk about it, bring down the national debt. You do universal child care, and you got a lot of mamas who can go to work, a lot of mamas who can finish their education. We make that investment in universal college. We've got
Thank you, Senator. Senator Klobuchar.
Education.
Yeah, you know, I appreciate your thoughts, Elizabeth, but I want to step back. I actually think that some of our colleagues who want free college for all aren't actually thinking big enough. I think what we have to look at is how we connect our education system with our economy. Where are our job openings and what do we need? We are going to have over 1 million openings for home healthcare workers that we don't know how to fill in the next 10 years. We are going to have open 100,000 jobs for nursing assistants. We, as my union friends know, we're going to have over 70,000 openings for electricians. We're not going to have a shortage of MBAs. We're going to have a shortage of plumbers. So when we look at that, then we step back. Where should our money go? It should go into K through 12. It should go into free 1- and 2-year degrees, like my dad got, like my sister got.
Thank you,
and
Senator
then we should
Klobuchar.
double the Pell Grants because we're going to need 4-year
Thank you,
degrees.
Senator
So the
Klobuchar.
money
Mr.
goes
Steyer?
where it should go instead of to rich kids going to college.
Mr. Steyer, as a billionaire, should your children have been entitled to free public college?
Damn.
No. And let me say this. I was one of the people who talked about a wealth tax almost a year and a half ago. I believe that the income inequality in this country is unbearable, unjust, and unsupportable. And the redistribution of wealth to the richest Americans from everyone else has to end. And I proposed a wealth tax almost a year and a half ago to start to address it and to raise some of the money, that we need. But I want to go beyond this and go back to this question about education, because we're talking a lot about college. But in fact, if you talk about the Poor People's Campaign, you have to realize that for the youngest kids, they are getting an education that's relative to the taxes in their neighborhoods. We need to redistribute money so every kid has a chance, so we're not legislating inequality for the next generation, and so we actually invest in every single kid, specifically poor kids, specifically Black kids, specifically brown kids. We need to start.
We'll be back with more from CNN's Democratic presidential debate live from Des Moines, Iowa. Stay right here.
At CNN, we see the devastation caused by natural disasters, famine, and war. We also see how the generosity of others can change lives. You and CNN's Impact to the World can help. Reputable charities that are checked out by CNN. See the difference it makes when you give time, share stories, or donate by just clicking the button. Be a part of the solution.
I have more trolls on this. It's unbelievable. I am so sorry to all the legit people who actually are trying to watch the damn show. Oh my gosh. You naughty trolls. I think they're all going to have to get kicked off. Dang.
Impact your world.
Most people think of Verizon as a reliable phone company. But to businesses, we're a reliable partner. We keep companies ready for what's next. We weave security into their business.
Virtualized.
Oh my God. I'm ignoring the comments for now. I just wanted to jump on for a minute to say thank you for legitimate people who are here, who are actually watching the freaking debate. And if you believe like I do that it's way past time for us to educate ourselves in reality, please come to my Wednesday show tomorrow. I do a show each Wednesday. It is about anti-racism, anti-bigotry, and we discuss inequality. And Nails and Glitter, I am so sorry you are working your butt off tonight. I apologize, but I am extremely happy that there are so many people who actually want to be here to watch. I appreciate it. if you are kind of like feeling like you're racist, if you're just going, yeah, I'm kind of racist, go onto my YouTube. I have lots of videos that will help you. Because I'm just noticing there's a lot of kind of, I don't know, I'm sure it's just an accident, but racist stuff going on and bigoted stuff. So if that was at 9. But I'm thinking you know, you're probably not too far past gone, and you should probably go on my YouTube channel and check out the videos because it will teach you, okay? And I'm just here to educate. Say that again.
Their operations
and build AI customer experiences. We also keep them ready for the next big opportunity, like 5G.
Almost all the Fortune 500 partner with us.
When it comes to digital transformation, Verizon keeps business ready.
Thank you, Count Bon.
How many people are in these kind of conditions? Climate change is here.
Imagine now all aflame. This just happened. I've never seen anything like this.
It's a world disaster. To adapt is to survive. I heard Grace for you. We must get it right. It's life.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing? Do you get the anger that is out here? They closed off this entire street.
Do you really think you're a champion of the gay community?
Sir, with all due respect, that's the argument of a 5-year-old.
I didn't start it. All the places I've been, all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're a part of what I do every night right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, weeknights at 8 only on CNN.
Come on, the tour's starting in just a few minutes.
Welcome to CNN Studio Tours. We are now overlooking the main newsroom for the global headquarters. This is CNN. Hey, Robin. Welcome to the control room.
We have breaking news. Let's go live.
Visit the CNN Tour and Store, located in downtown Atlanta at CNN's global headquarters. Go to our website or call for a reservation.
Nobody said it was easy. No one ever said it would be this hard. Oh, take me back to the start.
The Windsors, Inside the Royal Dynasty, premieres Sunday, February 16th at 10 on CNN.
I've been a war correspondent for more than 10 years, and every conflict that you can think of, I have never seen anything like this. This is happening right here, right now. Life is dangerous. There are snipers all around. You've got to do justice to the story. How many hours have you been on the boat? You can't not feel some level of personal impact.
CNN International is open to the world.
I'm Christiana Montour in Helsinki, Finland. I'm Becky Anderson in Abu Dhabi. I'm here in a remote part of southern India. From the New York Stock Exchange, St. Elizabeth, Birmingham, Puerto Rico, Hong Kong, London, Damascus, Germany, Moscow, Nairobi.
Go international, anytime, anywhere, from selected devices. Stream it live now.
Exhausted before we've even started.
CNN Go International.
He's interviewed 5 U.S. presidents, authored 7 books, and has an independent voice that resonates.
What happened to when we were united against a common enemy?
He's raw, unique, and one of America's most important talk show hosts. Watch Smirconish, Saturday mornings at 9 Eastern.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh, this could be it. Having a little trouble with the streaming here. Dang. That would be true. You know what he's talking about. Oh. Thank you, Michael. Michael, are you talking to me? Who are you talking to, Michael? Tell me. I don't know. Actually, I'm trying to get some help here to see what's going on. Can you guys, can you hear the debates? Mine's just not going. Can you? I know, nails and glitter. It's like, oh, the job you signed up for. I'm going to just see. Ah. Really, Neil? Yeah, I can't get my stream started again. I'm so sorry. Just give me 2 seconds here. It's
When you open and when you close that, and open
you want
the
to see if it's on people are watching. I mean, Steve's watching it. Close it.
let me check my phone. I would imagine just close it and reopen it.
Okay. How about this? True. Yeah.
Control 0. Oh, there you go, right there, right there. Click that.
Okay.
Take in the conference room. Show them you're ready to be your own boss.
Oh, it's still in the commercial?
Beauty of your smile. Crest three-dimensional whitening removes stains, whitens in between teeth, and protects from future stains.
More trolls.
Crest,
This is insane.
healthy, beautiful smiles for life.
Is that right?
By 2040, but unless we stop, the planet we are leaving our kids will be uninhabitable and unhealthy. We are seeing Australia burning. We saw California burning. The drought here in Iowa is going to make it harder for farmers to produce the food that we need. This is, of course, a national crisis. I've introduced legislation to indicate it's a national crisis. We have got to take on the fossil fuel industry and all of their lies and tell them that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of this planet. That's what the Green New Deal does. That's what my legislation does. And that is what we have to do.
Vice President Biden, your response.
My response is back in 1986, I introduced the first climate change bill, and check PolitiFacts, they said it was a game changer. I've been fighting this for a long time. I headed up the Recovery Act, which put more money into moving away from fossil fuels to solar and wind energy than ever has occurred in the history of America. Look, what we have to do is we have to act right away. The way we act right away is immediately, if I'm elected president, I'll reinstate all the mileage standards that existed in our administration, which were taken down. That's 12 billion gallons of gasoline, or barrels of gasoline be saved immediately. And with regard to those folks who, in fact, are going to be victimized by what's already happened, we should be investing in infrastructure that raises roads, makes sure that we're in a position where we have that every new highway built is a green highway. After 550,000 charging stations, we can create, and this is where I agree with Tom, we can create millions of good paying jobs. We're the only country in the world that's ever taken great crisis and turned it into great opportunity. And one of the ways to do it is with the farmers here in Iowa by making them the first group in the world to get to net zero emissions by paying them for planting and absorbing carbon in their fields right away. There's more to say, but I know.
A key part of your mission in this primary is going to be to prove to Democratic voters that you're strong enough to take on Donald Trump. Each of you face unique challenges in doing that. Mayor Buttigieg, you say you've had trouble earning the support of Black voters because you're unknown, but you've been campaigning for a year now, and polling shows you with next to no Black support that you'll need in order to beat Donald Trump. Is it possible that Black voters have gotten to know you and have simply decided to choose another candidate?
Ouch.
The Black voters who know me best are supporting me.
It's why I have the most support in South Bend. It's why among elected Black officials in my community who have gotten into this race, by far most of them are supporting me. And now, nationally, I am proud that my campaign is co-chaired by a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and to have support right here in Iowa from some of the most recognizable Black elected leaders, from Mayor Hart of Waterloo to former Representative Berry in Black Hawk County. Now, the biggest mistake we could make is to take Black votes for granted, and I never will. The reason I have the support I do is not because any voter thinks that I'm perfect. It's because of the work that we have done facing some of the toughest issues that communities can, not from the luxury of a debate or a television panel or a committee room, but on the ground, issues from poverty to justice in policing. And I'm proud to say we've been nationally recognized for our work as a race-informed city on delivering greater economic justice, that we have reduced use of force by leading the region in transparency around the use of force in policing. Of course, there is a much longer way to go in my community and around the country, but I will be a president whose personal commitment is to continue doing this work.
Senator Sanders, you call yourself a democratic socialist, but more than 2/3 of voters say they are not enthusiastic about voting for a socialist. Doesn't that put your chances of beating Donald Trump at risk?
Nope, not at all. And that is because the campaign that we are going to run will expose the fraudulency of who Donald Trump is. Donald Trump is corrupt, he is a pathological liar, and he is a fraud. Now, when Trump talks about socialism, what he talks about is giving hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks and subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. Donald Trump is a businessman, received $800 million in tax breaks and subsidies to build luxury housing. My democratic socialism says healthcare is a human right. We're going to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. We're going to have a Green New Deal and create up to $20 million saving the planet for our children and our grandchildren. We are going to take on the greed and corruption of the pharmaceutical industry and the insurance company. That is what democratic socialism is about, and that will win this election.
Mr. Steyer, you've spent more than $100 million of your own dollars on television ads. How do you convince voters that you're more than just your money?
Look, we know how Donald Trump is going to run for president. He's going to run on the economy. He's already told Americans last month in Florida, you don't like me and I don't like you, but you're all going to vote for me because the Democrats are going to destroy the economy in 15 minutes if they get in control. So let's be clear. I started a business by myself in one room. I didn't inherit a penny from my parents. I spent 30 years building that business into a multi-billion-dollar international business. Then I walked away from it and took the Giving Pledge and started organizing coalitions of ordinary Americans to take on unchecked corporate power. But whoever is going to beat Mr. Trump is going to have to beat him on the economy. And I have the experience and the expertise to show that he's a fake there and a fraud. Look, Mayor Pete has 3 years as an analyst at McKinsey. I have 30 years of international business experience. I can beat Trump on the economy. We're going to have to beat him on the economy. And I look forward to taking him down in the fall on the debate stage.
Mayor Buttigieg.
You demoted me. I was actually an associate, but that's okay.
Damn.
It was not the biggest part of my career, but I am ready to take on this president on the economy because I am from the exact kind of industrial Midwestern community that he pretends to speak to and has proven to turn his back on, and guided that community through a historic transformation when at the beginning of the decade I took office, we were described as a dying city. I'm ready to take on Donald Trump because when he gets to the tough talk and the chest thumping, he'll have to stand next to an American war veteran and explain how he pretended bone spurs made him ineligible to serve. And if he keeps trying to use religion, if a guy like Donald Trump keeps trying to use religion to somehow recruit Christianity into the GOP, I will be standing there not afraid to talk about a different way to answer the call of faith and insist that God does not belong to a political party. I am ready to take
Thank
on this
you.
president on every front.
Senator
Sure he
Klobuchar,
is. He is.
Senator Klobuchar, you're pitching yourself as a practical candidate who can get things done. And even tonight, you've dismissed some of the ideas that are offered in this primary as pipe dreams. How are you going to inspire Democratic voters with a message of pragmatism?
Our voters, actually all Americans, have seen now a number of years of a guy that has, I think, told over 15,000 lies. He is someone that literally has a rap sheet of divisive rhetoric. And I think what Americans want is something different. I am going to be able to stand across from him on that debate stage and say to my friends in Iowa, the Midwest is not flyover country for me. I live here. I'm going to be able to look at him and say, you've treated these workers and farmers like poker chips. For me, these are my friends and these are my neighbors. I'm going to be able to look at him and say, you know what? You got $413 million over the course of your career. That's how you built your fortune. And what I'm going to say is this. My grandpa worked 1,500 feet underground in the iron ore mine, saved money in a coffee can in the basement to send my dad to a 2-year community college. That's my family trust. And when you have been given an opportunity like that, you go into the world not with a sense of entitlement, Donald Trump, but with a sense of obligation.
Senator Warren, what do you say to voters who like your policies, but they're worried they will scare away swing voters you need to win this race in November?
So I was born and raised in Oklahoma. I have 3 older brothers who are all retired, who are all back there still. And 2 of my 3 brothers are Republicans. And sure, there are a lot of things we disagree on, and we can take dark corners and do the Democratic Republican talking points. But the truth is, there's a whole lot we agree on. You know, my brothers are just furious over Chevron and Eli Lilly and Amazon, that are giant corporations make billions of dollars in taxes, make billions of dollars in profits and pay nothing in taxes. My brothers say, I don't get this. I have to pay my taxes. Somebody has to keep the roads paved and the schools open and pay for our defense. They understand that we have an America right now that's working great for those at the top. It's just not working for anyone else. We have a chance to unite as Democrats, but also with independents and Republicans who are sick of living in a country that's working great for the politicians that are taking the money. It's working great for the lobbyists. It's working great for the corporate executives. It's just not working for everyone else. I'm building the grassroots movement, leading the fight. We're going to make this America work for everyone else. That is how we're going to beat Donald Trump.
Vice President Biden, the eventual nominee will face President Trump, who has no problem mocking people, using insulting nicknames, slinging mud, and telling lies. The debate against him will make tonight's debate look like child's play. Are you prepared for that?
I am prepared for that. Look, I've been the object of his affection now more than anybody else in the state. I've taken all the hits he can deliver, and I'm getting better in the polls, my going up. And by the way, I have overwhelming support from the African American community, overwhelming, more than everybody else in this operation, number one. Number two, working class people where I come from in Pennsylvania, the places I come from in Delaware, I have great support. I have support across the board, and I'm not worried about taking on Donald Trump at all. And with regard to the economy, I can hardly wait to have that debate with him. Where I come from, the neighborhoods I come from, they're in real trouble. Working class people and middle class people. When the middle class does well, working class has a way up and the wealthy do well. But what's happening now? They're being clobbered. They're being killed. They now have in a situation where if the vast majority believe their children will never reach the stage that they've reached in economic security. I love that debate because the American public is getting clobbered. The wealthy are the only ones doing well, period. I'm looking forward to the economic debate.
We'll be right back with more from CNN's Democratic presidential debate, live from Des Moines, Iowa. Stay right here.
I just wanted to come on for a minute and say thank you so much to the people who are watching the debate, little chat party here. I apologize profusely for the large number of trolls on here. This is my first time dealing with it, so please bear with me. I appreciate everyone just kind of ignoring it, I guess you could say. But I am extremely thankful to have people who are legitimately here to watch. I do have a live show tomorrow. It's called Real Talk with Angry Soccer Mom. And no, I'm not angry. I'm just kind of disappointed in my fellow humans, which is understandable, I think. The topics that we'll discuss are anything that has to do with anti-racism, anti-bigotry, and inequality in America. It starts at 9, same channel, and it is a discussion with me. So please consider coming. And normally I have my Tuesday live. It's kind of a new live show that I'm doing. So some people are funny. So if you want to, I'm going to have a show every Tuesday. I'm not sure exactly what the format's going to be, but if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, I do crazy rants. I do calm, educational, nice, anti-racism material. And I'm an educator. And so you can get pretty much anything you want on there, from just emotional rants to actual breaking news. I do interviews. One of my interviews I'm most proud of was done with a man who was one of the former leaders of the Mississippi Aryan Brotherhood. And it was a really life-changing thing for me to interview him. And he was amazing, and you should check it out. I just interviewed hang on a second. Is it starting again? Nope. I just interviewed a little boy who was horrifically abused with racism in school, and he took it all and turned it around and started his own clothing line to help other kids that were feeling bad about themselves because of discrimination. And that's all I have to say. And I'm always looking for connections with people who can collaborate with me and like-minded people. And I don't ever debate Trump people, because to me, this is not about politics. This is about being human. And so what am I going to say? You're a jackass? I mean, what can I say? So I don't debate Trump support, Trump supporters and stuff like that. I'm an independent, and now I'm done talking. Please, let's watch the show. Okay, hopefully.
I know that I'm in love with this girl, and I hope that she's in love with me. It's a big deal, and it's not easy for anybody.
The Windsors, Inside the Royal Dynasty, premieres Sunday, February 16th at 10 on CNN.
At CNN, we see the devastation caused by natural disasters, famine, and war. We also see how the generosity of others can change lives. You and CNN's Impact Your World can help. Reputable charities that are checked out by CNN. See the difference it makes when you give time, share stories, or donate by just clicking the button. Be a part of the solution. Impact Your World.
I've been a war correspondent for more than 10 years, and every conflict that you can think of, I have never seen anything like this.
This is happening right here, right now. Life is dangerous. There are snipers all around.
You've got to do justice to the story.
How many hours have you been on the boat?
You can't not feel some level of personal impact.
Nobody said it was easy. No one ever said it would be this hard. Oh, take me back to the start.
The Windsors, Inside the Royal Dynasty, premieres Sunday, February 16th at 10 on CNN.
Let's go.
Take us with you. CNN on Sirius XM 116. CNN International is open to the world.
I'm Christiana Montour in Helsinki, Finland. I'm Becky Emerson in Abu Dhabi.
I'm here in a remote part of southern India.
From the New York Stock Exchange, Port Elizabeth, Birmingham, Puerto Rico, Hong Kong, London,
Damascus, Jerusalem,
Moscow,
Nairobi. Go international, anytime, anywhere, from selected devices. Stream it live now.
Exhausted before we've even started.
CNN Go International.
Coming to HLN. All new episodes of Forensic Files with all new mysteries to solve. Forensic Files 2 premieres February 23rd at 10, only on HLN.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing? Do you get the anger that is out here? They closed off this entire street. Do you really think you're a champion of the gay community? Sure, with all due respect, that's the argument of a 5-year-old.
I didn't start. All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're a part of what I do every night right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, weeknights at 8, only on CNN.
He's covered 18 elections and 5 presidents across all 50 states. John King takes you inside politics with the best sourced reporters.
Is the president credible?
Inside Politics, weekdays at noon and Sunday mornings at 8 Eastern.
Sis boom ba. Sis boom ba. Describe the sound made when a sheep explodes.
The legends of late night TV are coming to CNN. The story of late night. The impeachment. Stay updated, stay informed with up-to-the-minute breaking news and analysis. There's only one place for it all. CNN.com/impeachment.
Sunday, all of Hollywood on one big night. If you win this award tonight, you're going to be set for life. The SAG Awards, live Sunday at 8 on TNT and CBS. He's interviewed 5 U.S. presidents, authored 7 books, and has an independent voice that resonates.
What happened to when we were you?
Oh, dang, it's off again. Okay, I hope so. This is just too much fun tonight.
Does it look like it's hanging?
Nope.
Right now it's in a commercial.
Okay. So I'm okay.
Yeah, it looks like it might have started.
Uh-oh. Oh, I'm 2 over, that's why.
What do you mean?
It's a silly thing.
should be back then.
Oh,
He's interviewed 5 U.S. presidents, authored 7 books, and has an independent voice that resonates.
Pardon me?
What happened to when we were united against a common enemy? He's raw, unique, and one of America's most important talk show hosts. Watch Smirconish, Saturday mornings at 9 Eastern.
Let's go.
Take us with you. CNN on Sirius XM 116.
I know that I'm in love with this girl, and I hope that she's in love with me. It's a big deal, and it's not easy for anybody.
The Windsors, Inside the Royal Dynasty, premieres Sunday, February 16th at 10 on CNN.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing? Do you get the anger that is out here? They closed off this entire street. Do you really think you're a champion of the gay community? Sure, with all due respect, that's the argument of a 5-year-old.
I didn't start it. All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're a part of what I do every night right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, weeknights at 8 only on CNN.
Coming to HLN. All new episodes of Forensic Files with all new mysteries to solve. Forensic Files 2 premieres February 23rd at 10, only on HLN.
So, you want to be the most powerful?
So many commercials.
Just how far will you go to get what you want? Will you break?
It does seem that way.
I'm not picking it up. You pick it up.
I'm not picking it up. I'll pick it up. They're clean, cuz my hand is clean. Oh yeah, I'm Charmin clean.
God, what kind of Charmin?
Pick up our coverage right now.
And good evening. I mean, this is people live from the Democratic debate in Des Moines, Iowa. This was it. The last time Americans will hear the Democratic candidates all on stage together, hearing them debate before the first votes are cast 20 days from now. Caucuses in 20 days. 6 candidates on stage, laser focus on policy, Iran, healthcare, jobs, the topics that matter most to voters, plus Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders confronting that conversation that they had, a private conversation that's now become very public. A woman can win the White House. A lot to dissect here. Chris Cuomo and I are breaking it all down with our top team of political minds. We'll be talking to the candidates who are up on that stage as well tonight. I want to go to a quick roundup with our folks right here. Gloria, who stood out to you?
Well, I think that Amy
Okay.
Klobuchar tried her hardest to distinguish herself as a pragmatist who can tell the rest of the Democrats to get real. I thought Biden.
Apparently it's over.
Okay, maybe a little over prepped. I think his closing statement was the best thing we heard from him, and that is what his campaign is all about, a fight for character and the soul of America.
I think that this was Elizabeth Warren's best debate in several debates. She was consistent, strong, emphatic. I think she did what she came there to do. As for the vice president, his closing was very, very strong. You wonder where that energy is throughout the debate. There were times when he seemed, very much sort of low energy. And the debate itself, we expected some fiery moments. There were some confrontations, but for whatever reason, and it may be that people are uneasy in a race where people are well liked, generally to take on folks that might drive second choices away, drive the undecided away.
Warren seemed to be the one person on stage who came in with a plan and executed it. She had, I thought, the best energy. She had the best moment in the debate when she talked about all the men on the stage losing, I think, 10 elections, and the women are the only ones who won all of their elections. I thought that was a good moment, arguing for electability and wrapping gender into it. I thought Biden had a terrible debate. This is a moment when he has come into this debate saying that he is the one who can take on Donald Trump, that he is steady and strong. He's seen none of those things in that debate, certainly not through the whole way through. His closing statement was good, but many people.
I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. I apologize for all the trolls that seem to be out tonight. I'm not sure how they got here, but they did. I apologize. I will work on it so that it's not so bad next time. But thank you for anyone who's here that legitimately wanted to watch the debates and chat about it. And again, I have this YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed, please consider subscribing and ring the bell if you want notifications. I do videos, I do rants, I do educational videos that are nice and sweet, and everything in between. And I also do interviews of people whose voices are not always heard because many are in numerical minority groups in America. And if you come tomorrow, please consider sticking to the topics, because I will definitely boot people off, because tomorrow's an actual conversation that I have every week with people. So can't have lots of trolls there. So thank you very, very, very much for watching. And just to clarify, no, I am not against people having a different opinion, but for the Democratic debate, it's not really appropriate since it's the Democratic people debating. So good night, everybody. Thank you for watching. This was a little crazy. All right. And are you guys like all friends or something? Or I don't really get it. It's so crazy. But thanks to people who are seriously watching. I appreciate it. This has been interesting. Good night. Dang, that was really weird.